Hello, and welcome. Tonight, or perhaps today, whenever you find yourself listening, allow me to take you on a gentle journey, far across time to an ancient world bustling with life, heavy with unfamiliar scents, and humming with the quiet rhythm of countless daily tasks. Together, we will wander through the streets of Rome, stand in the shadows of emperors, peer into hidden chambers of mystery, and drift through gilded halls where whispers of intrigue glide like soft fabric. But do not worry, we will travel at an unhurried pace. There is no need to keep up with the frenzied step of Roman merchants or the hurried slaves carrying amphiry through crowded lanes. Instead, we will move slowly, pausing often, letting the details unfold around, as each one a small brushstroke in a vast, intricate painting. If your eyes begin to close along the way, that is perfectly all right. Let the cadence of these stories guide you towards sleep, knowing that history waits patiently. Its stories do not rush, nor do they fade if you drift off before the end. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, breathe deeply, and imagine for a while that you are about to step into the ancient city of Rome. Not as a distant observer, but as someone truly there, navigating its bustling chaos, its heart, its small daily joys, and its unspoken fears. Rome, a slow awakening in the insula. Imagine, slowly, that you are opening your eyes, but not in your familiar modern room, not in crisp sheets and plump pillows, where filtered morning light plays across soft walls. No, this morning you wake in a cramped little chamber high above the streets of Rome, on the very top floor of a towering insula, one of the many apartment buildings that press together in the crowded quarters of the city. Beneath you, your bed is simply a sack of coarse cloth, loosely stuffed with straw. As you shift, it rustles faintly, and a few stiff stalks poke your skin through the thin linen. You draw a careful breath. The air is damp and heavy with overlapping smells. Old smoke clinging to rough timber beams, the musky tang of sweat that never quite washes away, and somewhere, faintly, a trace of last night's cooked chickpeas. You glance around the dim little room. Against one wall sits a small niche holding a clay lamp, its surface darkened by long use. A black smudge crawls up the plaster above it, where the flame once danced. Tiny cracks lace the walls like fragile veins, and from some of these, fine dust drifts down in lazy specks. Somewhere below, you hear a burst of laughter. Then a thin voice calls out, joined by the soft thud of hurried feet on wooden stairs. The insula is waking up. The building seems almost to breathe with the lives stacked within it. Children bickering, an old woman coughing, a merchant muttering under his breath as he counts his purse. You sit up, stretch, and notice a faint tightness in your muscles. This life is not kind to the body. There are no gentle mattresses, no climate controls, only what the city offers, day by day. Descending through narrow stairways, you dress in a simple tunic, rough against your skin. When you open the door to your room, a swirl of air brings sharper scents. Boiling lentils, bodies pressed close together, ashes from small household braziers. Carefully, you start down the narrow staircase. The boards creak under your weight, slightly uneven from countless feet passing day after day. You hold the splintery rail, your fingertips finding grooves where hundreds of hands have worried the wood smooth. A woman passes you on her way up, balancing a clay jug on her shoulder. She presses against the wall to let you by, eyes lowered, face lined with quiet fatigue. Perhaps she's already thinking of the meal she must prepare, or the water she must boil. The stairwell itself bears stories and scratches, initials, crude little drawings, half-faded phrases of love or insult, etched by passing hands. Each mark is a tiny ghost of someone else's morning, someone who rose in this same stale air, moving through these same cramped spaces. Emerging into the streets, at last you reach the ground floor. You step out through a heavy door, and Rome greets you all at once. The morning sun is bright and startling. It catches on the pale plaster walls and makes the cobblestones gleam damply. You narrow your eyes against it, taking a moment just to stand and adjust. The street ahead is narrow, hemmed in by tall, irregular buildings. It twists away, hiding what might lie around the next corner. At the edges, shallow gutters run with small trickles of murky water. Tiny scraps of fabric, leaves, bits of vegetable peel drift along lazily. Not all of it is pleasant. There are darker stains whose origins you would rather not contemplate. The layered scents of Rome. You draw a cautious breath. There is the pungency of urine, inevitable in these close quarters, rising sharply from the gutters, but also something more welcoming. The yeasty, slightly scorched aroma of bread just pulled from ovens nearby. Then a saltier note, fish unloaded early from river barges, already resting on beds of damp reeds. Sometimes a breath of wind carries a faint sweetness from a nearby shrine, where fresh flowers and melted wax mix into a perfume both tender and a little sad. These scents braid together into an invisible tapestry that is distinct, undeniably Roman. A small daily performance. You begin to walk slowly, carefully choosing your steps. A scrawny dog lies sprawled across the sun-warmed stones ahead, idly scratching at its flank, its eyes half close in lazy pleasure. After a moment it rolls onto its back, paws curling in the air to bask more fully in the gentle light. Nearby, two bare-chested children chase each other, each gripping the corner of what might be a shared piece of fruit. They giggle, shriek, tumble to the ground. Their mother calls to them from a doorway, voice tired but not unkind. They ignore her for a moment longer, captured by the fierce importance of their small game. A shop's threshold. You pause by a shop, its wide doorway shaded by a patched awning. Inside, a man is stirring something vigorously in a large clay vessel. As you watch, he lifts out a dipper of thin, sour-smelling wine and tips in a handful of crushed herbs, perhaps to mask flaws in the drink, perhaps simply for taste. He sees you and gestures with a small smile. Curious, you accept the roughly shaped cup. The rim is a little chipped, the surface cool and gritty. The wine hits your tongue sharp and acidic, but not unpleasantly so. It leaves a faint tingle in your throat. Just beside the shop, a sandal maker hunches over his low bench, tapping tiny nails into a strip of worn leather. His tunic is stained and his feet are black with street dust, yet he hums to himself, some droning tune that rises and falls without hurry. The press of people, the hush of risk further along. The crowd thickens. You have to step aside quickly more than once to avoid a donkey cart piled with oil and the driver clucks at the animal, oblivious to anyone forced to flatten against walls or leap back from the wheels. Voices rise around you in snatches, disagreements over prices, a beggar softly pleading for coins, a youth boasting loudly of something he likely did not do. A vendor strides past with a tray of pastries balanced on his head, calling out in rhythmic, practiced chants meant to lure buyers. Overhead, a sudden shout, "Cape!" makes your heart jump. A moment later, a splash just ahead marks where someone on an upper floor dumped a bucket of waste out the window. You exhale shakily, glad it was not on you. Another passerby is not so lucky. He curses, wipes his tunic with resigned disgust, then continues on without so much as looking up. And always there is that undercurrent of unease. Fire is a constant specter here. You see it in the wary way people glance at braziers left too close to doors, in the way a distant wisp of smoke makes heads turn, silent calculations running behind tired eyes. Is it close enough to worry? As evening comes on, when at last the sun begins to slip lower, the whole street seems to shift. Lamps are lit, their small flames glowing like scattered stars. Tables appear outside tiny taverns, men settling down with cups of wine, voices low and lazy. Somewhere a lyre strikes up a fragile tune. You find a place on a low step to sit and watch. Across from you, a woman unpacks a basket of herbs, laying them carefully on a cloth. The air fills with fresh green smells, mingling with roasting onions from a brazier a little way off. Laughter drifts over you like a light blanket. A pair of older men sit cross-legged on a woven mat, shaking small dice from a cup, muttering half-jokes under their breath. They nod to you in passing camaraderie, as if to say, "This is Rome. This is how evenings breathe here." Why perhaps you would not last. And as you sit there, resting sore feet, you realize how relentless all of this is. The constant vigilance against falling waste, against disease that lurks in tainted water or spoiled fish. The way every day must be earned, not only by the sweat of backs, but by careful maneuvering through a tangle of social debts and small, unspoken rules. Perhaps, for all its rough beauty, you would not last long here. Not because of some single catastrophe, but because of the sheer wearing down of comfort, the lack of soft places, the absence of solitude, the daily requirement to navigate crowds and hazards with quiet, watchful and yet, there is something almost admirable here. These people, who rise each morning to the same hard straw, the same precarious stairs, the same narrow streets. They do so without questioning that life should be otherwise. To them, this is simply how the world is. Their resilience is woven into every stone, every shouted bargain, every gentle hush of Evie. So you stand at last, stretching weary limbs, and begin the slow walk back to your insula. The lamps flicker, the crowd thins. Somewhere far off, a temple bell tolls softly, marking time that flows indifferent to your wonder, and you carry with you the delicate knowledge of just how much quiet strength it took to live even a single ordinary day in ancient Rome. Entering the palace world now, allow yourself to drift slowly away from the crowded streets, from the scent of stale wine and roasting lentils. Picture instead that you are ascending a winding stone road up the Palatine Hill, your sandals brushing over clean, swept pathways edged with manicured hedges. As you climb higher, the noise of the city recedes. The voices fade to a distant murmur, like waves on a far-off shore. Here, the air seems cooler, touched by the sweet breath of laurel and rosemary that grows in careful rows along the palace gardens. At the summit stands the great imperial residence, the Dumas of Rome's first citizen, though by now the emperors are something more than mere citizens. Massive gates of iron and carved wood swing open before you. Guards in polished breastplates stand at rigid attention. Their eyes never quite meet yours, for you are beneath notice, or perhaps simply beneath concern. You pass beneath a high archway, your gaze trailing upward to catch glimpses of frescoes, scenes of hunting, of delicate mythic figures frolicking across a sky painted in 100 shades of gentle blue. The soft light of oil lamps turns gold on the walls. It all feels impossibly refined, almost dreamlike, after the raw smells and jostling bodies of the streets below. The promising rise of Caligula. It is here, in these hushed halls, that Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, known to nearly all by the affectionate childhood name of Caligula, once walked and smiled and received the adoring applause of Rome. Imagine him younger, before the shadow fell across his eyes, a tall, graceful figure, draped in robes of fine wool dyed that precious, difficult purple reserved only for those of imperial blood. His face is open, his gestures warm. Crowds surge to catch a glimpse of him. Veterans from his father Germanicus' legions cheer themselves hoarse. Old women press forward to bless him, whispering hopes for the restoration of Roman virtues. For when Caligula first came to power, it seemed the city had been granted a gentle savior. The years before had been tense, uncertain. Now suddenly, prisons were opened. Political exiles recalled. Generous donatives flowed to the soldiers who beat their shields in delight. Great games were announced, chariot races, theatrical performances, spectacles where elephants danced under painted banners. Rome smiled. For a little while, all seemed bright. The slow turn toward unease. But if you wander these corridors long enough, standing by the great marble pillars and watching the patterns of shadow crawl across the mosaics, you'd begin to notice a change. Servants move more quickly, eyes lowered, their voices dropping to whispers. Senators approach the audience chamber with carefully composed expressions, clutching scrolls tighter than necessary. Word spreads of Caligula, a sudden illness, a fever that seized him with such ferocity that many thought he would surely die. The city held its breath. Shrines overflowed with flowers, offerings piled at the feet of countless statues. When at last he recovered, Rome erupted in celebrations all over again. But among those closest to the palace, an unease had already taken root. They say something lingered after the fever, a slight brightness in Caligula's gaze, a quickness in his laugh that did not quite reach his eyes. He returned to his duties. He still smiled, still offered gracious words, yet servants found themselves summoned in the dead of night for trivial errands, questioned at length about matters they could scarcely comprehend at the imperial banquet. Now imagine that you are invited, through some delicate connection, to dine at the emperor's table. You stand nervously outside a grand triclinium, a dining hall lit by dozens of bronze lamps that cast delicate shadows over reclining couches. When at last you are announced, you step in on unsteady feet. The room smells faintly of warm beeswax, of roasted game, of expensive perfumes dabbed onto wrists and necks. Musicians sit discreetly in one corner, coaxing soft melodies from lyres and reed pipes. Caligula is already there, reclining with lazy elegance on a couch piled high with crimson cushions. His robes seem to spill across the floor like poured wine. As you bow, he inclines his head with a charming smile that feels just a shade too still, too careful. Platters are brought forward by silent slaves. Delicate dormice rolled in honey and poppy seeds. Peacocks with bright feathers carefully arranged around steaming meat. Tiny bowls of olives glistening with oil. You reach for one, trying not to fumble. Your throat is dry. The Emperor speaks lightly of the games planned for next week, of a new aqueduct begun under his direction. His words dance along pleasantly. Then, with almost playful casualness, he asks a senator about his loyalty. His voice gentle, his eyes unblinking. The senator laughs nervously, assures his devotion. Caligula's smile widens. "Of course," he says, with a small flick of his hand, and the moment is gone. But a tightness lingers in the senator's shoulders for the rest of the evening, and in yours too. Growing suspicions and sudden dread. In the days that follow, the palace becomes a maze of suspicion. One of your friends, a minor clerk, vanishes. No one says where he went. When you ask, you are met with quick shakes of the head, lowered gazes. Someone mutters that he may have spoken too freely at a banquet. Caligula, meanwhile, grows grander in his gestures. He commands a floating bridge to be constructed across the Bay of Baia, linking to distant points with a causeway of boats lashed together, just so he can ride across it in gleaming armor, mocking prophecies that no one from his line could ever do such a thing. Crowds line the shores to watch, cheering half in delight, half in anxious fascination. Rumors multiply like shadows at dusk. They say he speaks often with statues of Jupiter, sometimes arguing, sometimes laughing softly as if sharing some private joke. They say he plans to make his favorite horse a consul, a gesture so absurd it blurs the line between jest and decree. The quiet terror of proximity to power. And through it all, life at court continues. Banquets are held, petitions heard, tribute accepted from far-flung but beneath the glittering surfaces, everyone moves with an invisible caution. Each phrase is weighed before it is spoken, each glance measured. Imagine again that you stand by a column, observing the Emperor from a respectful distance. His laughter rings out, clear and light, as he tosses a handful of figs to a pet monkey that scampers across the marble floor. For a heartbeat you could almost forget the stories. Then he turns, catching your eye with a sudden sharpness that sends a chill racing down your spine. His smile returns. But now you are acutely aware that your fate might rest on something as fragile as his shifting mood. Reflections on fragile grandeur. So this is what power often looks like up close. Not merely robes stitched with gold, or feasts piled high with delicacies, but a delicate, dangerous dance of appearances. It is fragile, easily bruised, endlessly watchful. You might wonder, standing there in your simple borrowed tunic, whether all the luxury is worth the breathless care it demands. Whether it would not be better to be back in the streets below, dodging chamber pots and haggling over olives, free from the bright, hungry gaze of an emperor who seems to float half a step above mortal concerns. Perhaps this is why so many of Rome's powerful ended their days in whispers and shadows. Daggers drawn in hidden corners, poisons slipped into evening cups. In the end, Caligula too would be brought down by those closest to him, his young face struck from statues, his name half erased from the annals. But that is a story for another night, a gentle close to this chapter. So we step quietly back, leaving the marble halls and the cautious courtiers behind us. Let your breath ease, let the echoes of soft music and the rustle of silk recede into stillness. Tomorrow, Rome will continue. Senators will plot, banquets will sparkle, lamps will be lit. But for now, allow yourself simply to rest, carrying with you only the calm knowledge of how delicate even the grandest power can be, entering the hidden world. Now, if you are still with me, or even if your mind drifts lightly along these words, imagine stepping once more away from the bright avenues of Rome, away from the sunlit forums, the laughter around wine cups, the harsh cries of market vendors. Instead, you find yourself moving down a quieter street, your footsteps muffled on packed earth. Here, the buildings lean close together, casting long strips of shadow. A dog lies curled on a doorstep, barely raising its head as you pass. At the end of this lane is a low doorway, almost hidden by an overhanging vine. You duck beneath it, and immediately the air changes. It is cooler here, tinged with moisture and something older, something like the faint memory of stone. Before you is a staircase, narrow and worn in the center by countless feet. A small clay lamp rests in a niche nearby, its flame dancing gently. You lift it carefully, feeling the warmth seep into your palm, and begin to descend. The descent into the each step takes you deeper beneath Rome. Above, the city continues in its noisy tapestry. Carts rumble over stones, coins jingle, laughter bursts from taverns. But down here, those sounds fade to a muted hum. They seem impossibly far away, as if belonging to another world. The walls grow close around you, rough and irregular. You can trace your fingers over them, feel tiny flecks of plaster crumble away. Occasionally your lamp's glow picks out faint reddish symbols, scratched or painted long ago. Perhaps stars, perhaps abstract signs meant to guard this passage. At the bottom of the stairs, you pause. Before you stretches a narrow chamber, longer than it is wide. Its low ceiling supported by simple arches. The air is heavy with damp earth, with old wax, and with the sharp resinous temps of incense smoldering somewhere out of sight. Stone benches run along either side, worn smooth in spots by many hours of waiting, of quiet prayer or whispered conversation. At the far end stands a small altar, its top blackened from countless flames. Behind it, carved in deep relief, is the image that will greet you again and again in these sacred places. The youthful god in his Phrygian cap, plunging his dagger into the great cosmic bull. Watching the quiet ritual, you take a seat on one of the benches, letting the coolness of the stones seep through your thin tunic. Around you, a handful of other figures sit or kneel. Some bow their heads in silent contemplation. Others gaze steadily at the altar, eyes reflecting the soft tremor of torchlight. An acolyte moves slowly through the room, carrying a shallow bronze bowl. As he passes, you catch the spicy scent of burning resin rising from it. Tiny coils of smoke drift upward, curling around unseen currents, then melt into the darkness above. There is no grand spectacle here, no roaring crowds or lavish pageantry like in the temples of Jupiter. Everything is quiet, deliberate, held close to the heart. This is a faith of small spaces and hidden meanings. Occasionally the priest, perhaps simply called the potter, the father of this local group, speaks. His voice is low, even almost hypnotic. You can't catch every word. Some are in old forms of speech, some cloaked in symbols only initiates would fully understand. But there is no urgency. The sound of his chanting seems designed more to soothe than to stir. Symbols and layered meanings, your eyes drift again to the carved relief. It is a strange, crowded scene. Mithras turns slightly, almost as if to shield what he is doing, while the bull arches its neck in silent agony. A dog licks at the flowing life. A snake coils toward it. A scorpion grips the bull's genitals. To modern eyes it might seem gruesome, even sinister, but here it carries meanings layered like folds of cloth, life drawn out of death, order carved from chaos. These animals, each carefully placed, represent stars, seasons, perhaps the very cycles of the soul, or so some say. Much is lost to time, left behind like discarded sandals in long-collapsed tunnel. Imagine you are a new initiate trying to learn these signs. Someone might lean close to murmur a simple clue. The dog, they say, is desire. The snake, time slithering forward. The scorpion, death's sting hidden underfoot. The bull itself is raw vitality, life that must be sacrificed to bring cosmos from confusion. The slow unfolding of brotherhood time slips oddly here. There are no clocks, no noisy shouts from vendors to mark the hour. Only the steady drip of water from some distant crack and the slow dimming of the torches as oil is consumed. The men around you, for the cult of Mithras was only open to men, shift slightly now and then, but mostly remain still. From time to time, one rises, steps to the altar, and performs a quiet gesture, a simple word, a brief tracing of fingers across the chest. When the priest signals, all stand together. Hands are laid lightly on shoulders, creating a soft ripple of human contact down the narrow hall. You feel the warmth of the person beside you, hear the faint catch of his breath, sense the shared hush. There are 7 grades within this brotherhood, each with its own small mysteries, each meant to draw a man deeper into the order. Perhaps you are merely a korax, a crow, the first humble step, learning to watch and listen. Others may be lions, guardians of greater secrets, yet here, for these moments, all stand as one under the quiet gaze of myth. A simple, sacred meal eventually. The more formal parts of the ritual ebb away. The priest gives a small nod, and acolytes bring out baskets of coarse bread and shallow cups of wine. There is no lavish feast here, no silver plates or honeyed confections, just a humble meal, shared in silence or in low murmurs that feel almost tender. You break off a piece of bread. It is still warm from being laid near the fire. The crust flakes under your fingers. The wine is rough, tart on your tongue, but something about this shared act, all of you pausing to eat together in this dark cavern, makes it taste rich beyond its simple measure. Around you, men smile quietly. Some clasp hands, pressing forearms in a sign of trust. In these small gestures is the heart of this cult: fraternity, secrecy, the comforting notion that even in a vast and indifferent empire, there is a circle where you are known, where your presence matters. Emerging into night, at last, the gathering draws to its gentle close. Lamps are snuffed one by one, sending thin tendrils of smoke to coil and vanish. You stand, stretch your legs, and follow the slow file of men back up the narrow stairs. When you emerge once more onto the street, night has fully settled over Rome. Stars prick the velvet dark, streets echo with distant laughter. For a moment you simply stand, breathing the cool air, feeling it rush down into your lungs, as if it carries something newly precious. Perhaps tomorrow you will return to the busy markets, to the endless shuffle of obligations. Perhaps you will once again dodge a carelessly dumped chamber pot, or haggle over stale olives. But tonight, a small glow lingers inside you. The memory of close hands on shoulders, of chants murmured in shadow, of bread broken in sacred quiet. It is a mystery not meant to be fully understood, only felt, carried like a secret stone in your pocket. A final thought for this passage. So let us leave these hidden chambers behind for now. Let the echoes of chanting fade. Let the scent of warm wax and burning resin drift gently from your thoughts. Breathe easily, knowing that mystery is not always meant to be solved. Sometimes it exists simply to soften the world a little, to remind you that even the most powerful cities, the mightiest empires, once held small, secret spaces where people gathered close and found comfort in things unseen. The delicate morning world picture now a different corner of Rome, not the bustling insulae of crowded streets, not the hidden sanctuaries beneath the city, but a grand domus, a private house of the senatorial class, spreading wide behind high walls, its entrance marked by carved columns and a heavy wooden door banded with bronze. Imagine you are a senator's wife. Perhaps your name is Livia, or Antonia, or another old, noble name passed down like a treasured necklace. Your family line is important here, as much a garment as the fine stola you wear. You rise early, though there is no hard labor waiting for you. Instead, there are matters of presence, of grace, of managing a world where every glance, every small courtesy carries weight. Your bed is a low, wide affair draped with embroidered linens. As you sit up, two maids approach quietly, one bearing a basin of warm water scented with crushed rosemary, the other carrying a thin towel of linen, its edges meticulously hemmed. They help you wash your face and hands. The water is pleasantly warm, steam rising in fragile curls. The private chamber in careful beauty next comes the slow work of hair. You settle on a cushioned stool in your bed. The walls are painted with scenes of Arcadian fields, soft greens and gentle figures of shepherds, perhaps meant to soothe the eyes and mind. Sunlight filters through a thin curtain, casting delicate patterns across your lap. Two slaves stand behind you, carefully untangling the night's sleep from your long dark hair. Their fingers move with quiet expertise, smoothing fragrant oil along the strands to give them shine. They twist and coil the locks into intricate knots, fixing them with tiny pins of ivory and bone. All the while you breathe slowly, watching your own reflection in a polished bronze mirror propped against the wall. It wavers slightly, catching tiny ripples of light, so that your face seems to float there, serene, composed, though your mind might be gently stirring with thoughts of the day ahead. Moving through the atrium when you are ready, you make your way into the atrium. Your sandals whisper softly over mosaic floors that depict sea creatures frolicking amid swirling blue tiles. The central impluvium, a shallow pool that catches rainwater from the opening above, glitters faintly, small petals drifting on its surface, where someone must have laid fresh flowers earlier. Servants are already at work. One arranges small clay lamps along a shelf, another sweeps a faint film of dust from the threshold. A boy hurries past, carrying a folded piece of papyrus, likely a note from your husband's steward. Near the door stands your husband himself, clad in the dignified folds of a toga praetexta, edged with the narrow band of purple that signals his rank. He is speaking with another senator who has come early. Their voices low, but charged with the subtle tension of political alliance, or perhaps rivalry. You approach, offering a light word of greeting, eyes lowered just enough to show respect but not subs. Your husband nods with the smallest flicker of approval. This, too, is a kind of theatre, one you have learned well. The gentle governance of the household. Much of your morning flows in quiet supervision. You visit the storeroom to inspect baskets of figs and amphorae of oil, conferring with the house steward on what needs replacement. You pass through the peristyle garden, pausing to admire new buds on the climbing roses. A small fountain there bubbles gently, its clear trickle of water providing a soothing counterpoint to the distant city sounds. In the kitchen, you exchange soft words with the cook about the day's meals. Today there may be guests, perhaps important ones, and each dish must be perfect. You taste a bit of cheese from Kumi, tart and creamy, nodding approval. Even these small decisions carry ripples outward. They will reflect on your household's reputation as surely as the gilded dishes laid on the table. Sometimes you catch sight of your own reflection again, this time in a polished silver platter being carried to the triclinium. Your face is calm, measured. That calm is its own kind of power here. The midday meal, a social stage. When midday comes, the triclinium is transformed. Low couches are arranged around a long table. Cushions of soft wool are laid out, dyed in subtle shades. Muted saffron, dusty rose, chosen with care to show taste without gaudy excess. Slaves move with practiced ease, placing platters of food on small stands. There are bowls of olives glistening with oil, roasted game birds, delicate pastries filled with honeyed nuts. In slender jugs rests watered wine spiced with cinnamon and myrtle. Guests begin to arrive. Each is announced by a soft-voiced servant. You greet them with a shallow incline of your head, offering words of welcome that float lightly through the warm air. Laughter rises in gentle waves as people settle into their places, reclining on elbows, talking of minor scandals, of new statues being erected in the forum, of distant relatives who have made surprisingly good. The quiet tension beneath the surface, yet beneath all this ease runs an undercurrent of careful watchfulness. You notice the way one matron fingers the clasp at her shoulder, glancing sideways at another woman's more finely worked brooch. You see two senators exchange a look that might be camaraderie, might be warning. Your own posture is an art, slightly angled, attentive, your hand resting just so on the couch's edge. Every word you choose is mild but gracious, every smile precisely measured. A small musician's ensemble plays softly in a corner. The notes of the flute are slow, wandering, like lazy insects drifting on a summer breeze. You let the music wash over you, allowing it to smooth the tiny lines of tension that inevitably gather around your eyes. From time to time, your husband catches your gaze. A fractional lift of his brow is enough to tell you when it is time to guide the conversation in a different direction, when to laugh a little more brightly, when to offer a compliment to soothe a slight that might otherwise blossom into rumor. As the afternoon wanes, the meal stretches on. Platters are cleared and replaced. Hands gesture over small cups, tracing idle shapes in the air. One guest recites a short poem, voice rich and slow, drawing out the final lines until they seem to hover in the scented space. At last, as shadows begin to lengthen across the painted walls, guests start to depart. You walk with them as far as the atrium, offering gentle words of farewell, each carefully tailored, a hope that the lady's father recovers from his illness, a compliment on a new necklace, a polite murmur of how Rome feels more gracious when such fine company graces your home. When the last guest is gone, the house seems almost to sigh. Slaves move quickly to gather scattered cushions, to sweep stray petals from the floor. You remain a moment longer, standing still, breathing in the faint mingled scents of wine, warmed wax, and fading perfume. Returning to your private world later, in your private chamber, you sit before a small brazier where fragrant wood smolders. sending up thin blue spirals. A servant carefully unpins your hair, combing it out with slow strokes that pull gently at your scalp. It is a soothing ritual, one that draws out the day's tension as surely as it draws strands into neat lines. You look again into your bronze mirror. This close, the surface shows tiny scratches that catch the light. Your face is calm, eyes slightly lowered. You know well how fragile all this is, how quickly rumor can tarnish even the most carefully maintained honor, how easily favor can shift, like the wind turning in the forum. Yet for now, you have navigated this day's delicate currents. You have upheld the quiet dignity of your household, ensured its place in Rome's endlessly shifting dance of alliances, a gentle reflection to end. So rest now in this twilight, as oil lamps are lit along the corridor outside your door, each small flame a gentle sentinel against the dark. Let the intricate pressures of reputation and grace slip away for a while. Breathe deeply, and imagine the hush settling over the domus, footsteps growing scarce, murmurs fading, until only the soft rustle of fabric and the distant song of a nightbird remain. In this Rome of marble and whispers, you have played your part beautifully, and tomorrow, quietly, patiently, life will begin again. So now, as the gentle tide of our journey through ancient Rome begins to recede, allow yourself to pause here for a moment, breathing slowly, eyes half closed perhaps, while the images still hover in your mind. We have wandered together through many corners of this old, bustling world, each one different, yet all tied by the same patient rhythm of human lives. You walked the narrow streets where refuse ran in shallow streams, and every footstep risked a sudden tumble of water from above. He stepped carefully around market stalls, felt the press of strangers' shoulders, heard the sharp calls of hawkers selling olives, small loaves, pungent cheeses. You smelled the warm bread, the sweat, the crushed flowers left at tiny shrines. Then you climbed into candlelit halls where emperors reclined on embroidered couches. You watched Caligula's easy laughter that hid quicksilver moods, saw senators fidget under his gaze, learned how power could flicker so swiftly from generosity to suspicion. In those marbled chambers, beneath bright frescoes and fluted columns, you felt the quiet tension that laced every polite exchange. After that, we descended together into hidden sanctuaries below the city, narrow Mithras, heavy with incense and old secrets. You sat on cold benches beside silent men, watched thin streams of smoke curl toward rough ceilings, and tasted coarse bread shared in sacred hush. In those dark caverns, you touched something older than empire, a fragile brotherhood woven of whispers and trust. And finally, we strolled through airy peristyles, and elegant trailing behind the careful steps of a senator's wife. You breathed the scent of crushed rosemary on her hair, felt the warm flicker of oil lamps at her evening toilet, and saw how every smile, every soft word balanced the delicate weight of reputation in a city where scandal moved swifter than fire. A quiet perspective. So much of Rome was struggle, performance, small battles for safety, for favor, for a place within the sprawling machine of its greatness. And yet, within these struggles lay the tender, ordinary moments that make up all human life. Laughter over dice tossed on worn mats, a shared sip of sour wine in the shadows, the hush of a hand resting briefly on another essay. Perhaps that is what history always comes back to in the end. The tiny, living details, a scrap of conversation, the pattern of lampsit on a ceiling, the softness of wool laid over weary shoulders at night. Letting it fade gently, so allow yourself now to drift back from Rome. Let its voices grow quieter, its streets blur into gentle mists. Imagine the temples and taverns dissolving like painted scenes in evening rain, leaving only a faint echo of footsteps and the lingering scent of olive wood smoke. Breathe in, slowly, and let it out even slower. Whatever weight the day placed upon your shoulders, set it aside for a while. Rest in the simple knowledge that countless lives came before yours, each carrying burdens, and small joys not so different from your own, each fading quietly into time, leaving the present moment free, calm, and yours alone. If sleep comes, welcome it softly. Let these old stories fold around you like a worn but gentle cloak, and if you stay awake a little longer, know there is no hurry. History will wait patiently, always ready to whisper more tales another night.